Hello, my name is Blair. The purpose of this video is to promote the most dangerous book in America, which I wrote last March, about 7 months after August 2017. It tells the history of Charlottesville and also the events leading up to the August 12th riot. This black and white version is $10, and the color ebook is only $2. And the links I will provide below if you want to get a copy. You can also get the color version, which I printed out last year. Here you go. I'm going to use the color version to let you know a little bit about the book and how powerful it is. Now, some of my detractors say, well, Blair, that's just your opinion. Well, how do I know what happened 100 years ago? I have to use sources. And this is the Berlin Wall of a UVA. Well, what's that doing in there? Well, it's sort of a meme that shows kind of the theme of the book. And if you take out the history, then the present day just becomes bizarre. You got to put them both together to get a normal, coherent history or worldview. Now, the book counts down the events that lead up to August 12th. But it also, the first chapter summarizes the complete history of Charlottesville. It starts out with Queen Charlotte, the black lady that Charlottesville is named after. Now, she was born on May 19th. That's the wedding day of Prince Harry and Princess Meghan. They chose that date because they wanted everybody to know that Meghan was mixed race, just like Queen Charlotte, the wife of the evil King George III of the Revolution. Now, the summary has maps. Now, I wasn't alive 200 years ago, but there you go. And most people don't really know the history. Here you go. That's Stonewall Jackson, 1919, the Court Square Park, right? And here's an 1877 map that shows annexations, how Charlottesville's borders are expanding. It shows Court Square, and it shows Lee Park, which at the time was Mr. Venable's home. Okay, let me show you a few more maps. Look at this. That's a 1929 map, when race, it was all about race in the 20s, but before the 20s, it was not about the race. It was the golden age of race relations. Here's 1935, which shows Vinegar Hill, but also the much larger urban renewal of Garrett Square in South Downtown, the warehouse district. Oh, there used to be more than just warehouses in that area. Okay, let me see. Here's 1950s map. To the left, or over here is the vast Garrett urban renewal area that's not there anymore. And that's the biggest secret in Charlottesville's history, is that urban renewal is much bigger than Vinegar Hill. That's chapter 5, my longest chapter, which I have the most history about. But it's also political, about the city council and how the city council has changed over time. Now look, we have 9 precincts, but we only use 1 global district because we have an at-large system, which the Klan established in the 1920s. Look at that. Charlottesville surrendered. That's a new holiday. And here's the front page of the Daily Progress in 1924, when the Lee statue went up. That's where the riot occurred. Now, in 1924, the people who put up the statue went to great lengths to distance themselves from the Klan, but the Klan tried to hook on to that. And look at this, 1954 is when urban renewal began, and it continues to this day with the same housing authority, the same policies. Nothing has changed except it's gotten much bigger. Of course, the history of August 12th would not be complete without the Charlottesville Five, the city councilors who precipitated the riot. Now, let me roll on and start to show you the countdown to the riot. Right. Hold on. All right. There you go. Oh, whoops, I should have gone from this page. Look, the timeline starts counting down. Look at that. To August 12th. And chapter 2 focuses on August 12th. And chapter 3 focuses on the at-large city council. And look, we have 9 precincts, but we don't use them. This is the at-large system, established in the 1920s explicitly to disenfranchise the black votes. Now in city council, there are some ethnic minorities, but they don't represent minorities. They all represent the same white majority. Now, here's a reference to the law about the statues. So the book has sources. It's not just me rattling on. Jefferson School. Got the history of Jefferson School, which is very controversial. And only in the last few years, after 10 years of me talking about it, finally, they were able to acknowledge the early history of Jefferson School. So I try to be inclusive of black people and white people. Now there's anti-black racism, plenty of that in Charlottesville, and anti-white history. It just depends on the situation. And here's the history of the whole school system. Jefferson School, look, all the way across the top. And then you had all those white schools. And finally got integrated in like 1959. And chapter 5 is the longest chapter. And that's on urban renewal, public housing, eminent domain, redevelopment, and that sort of thing. That's what I focused on. I focused on 2 things in my 20 years of activism. One is urban renewal, because I lived through it. Vinegar Hill happened before I was born. How did I live through urban renewal? Because I was on the other side of the tracks. Much larger urban renewal project, which is now Friendship Court, which is on the side of a 1915 neighborhood. Look, back to Vinegar Hill. Before, after. There's the Lewis and Clark statue, which is pretty controversial today because guess what? John West lived right across the street, the richest black man in Charlottesville history. He built Vinegar Hill, Preston Avenue, and other places. And the black success and prosperity of the golden age of race relations in the late 1800s and early 1900s is why Charlottesville switched to an at-large system so that blacks would not have any more representation even to this day. Of course, in 2005, this urban renewal resonated again. The Little Pink House in New London, Connecticut, the Kelo decision. You know, I try to link to national issues as much as I can, and the day after Kelo, guess what? Charlottesville partied in the biggest urban renewal zone in the city. There you go, American Dumpster. There were so many ironies in effect that it was surreal that day. So, look, there's a picture of me in my 2000 campaign, a dry run for the 2003 campaign against Mitch Van Yeries. And chapter 5 is all about this history that very few people know about. Let me see. Let me get you some more pictures. There's me. Does it look like me? Running against Mitch Van Yeries in 2003, but the Republicans didn't like that. They supported Mitch, even though nobody else was running against him. Oh well, you know, it is what it is. You know, the Republican Party has collapsed now. But I want to make it clear that the book is not just my opinions. Look, I didn't write this about Oakwood Cemetery. Alexander Garrett, the Garrett neighborhood. He was a friend of Thomas Jefferson, and he was at Monticello when Thomas Jefferson died. And he recorded what happened on Jefferson's last breath. And here's the great urban renewal project that nobody knows about. Here's Vinegar Hill. That's where I grew up. Here's where Friendship Court is, the 1915 neighborhood. Here is 1860. Okay? So this is rare history, and I preserved it in a book. And look, that's Friendship Court. My brother, sister, and cousin from 1967. Friendship Court is there now, and few people know about it. Let me roll on. Time is rolling along. Look. Daughters of Zion Cemetery is right there in the Garrett Urban Renewal Zone. It's not Vinegar Hill. Here's my uncle, Thomas Dowell. He ran for city council in the 1970s 3 times on a platform to stop urban renewal. Now, very few people opposed Vinegar Hill, but by the time you got a decade later, everybody was opposing urban renewal, but it was too late. This is on Ware Street, my grandmother's house. The house that stood against urban renewal. Let me roll on. Let's see. Of course, here's Levy Avenue, parking lot. The 1972 clearance where Better Living lost 4 parcels in 1972. And of course, 1981, Better Living left town. That's Charlottesville Lumber in 1893. It renamed itself Better Living in 1968. All right, the book is a reference book as much as anything else. And here you go, the Bill of Rights. So if you hear like a news event about the Bill of Rights, lately about Hong Kong protesting for the 6th Amendment rights, there you go, 6th Amendment, 5th Amendment, reference it. I'm not hiding anything. Downtown Mall, it's still there. It's not lost. The history is lost, but the mall is still there. And the history is that only 2 people voted for it. So it was never approved. Here's Madame Marguerite's opulent brothel, where all that money was found in 1972. Now, the only reason I care about that is because it shows that Garrett urban renewal did happen. But I didn't want to just focus on urban renewal. That's, heavy. Here's the YMCA. Actually the second YMCA. And in the early 1900s, we had 3 YMCAs. 2 for white people and 1 for black people. And I have the timeline of the YMCA. This is rare. I couldn't find this anywhere. I had to do a lot of research and finally put it together from different books and resources. Here is the Elks Lodge in 1902. Now, it was involved in the 1920s white supremacy, KKK fervor, racial fervor, but they went past it. We got past it. And let's see. I also got, the reason Kmart made the cut is because in 2011, they lost 110 parking spaces to a mistake for Hillsdale Drive, so the city used eminent domain to circumvent a lease agreement that Kmart had with its owner. And, basically, urban renewal and eminent domain is much bigger than most people think in Charlottesville. Now, that's another theme. And most cities, it's way bigger than most people realize. Chapter 11 is not about urban renewal or the culture wars. It's about the water supply, right? And almost nobody agrees on my version of the water supply. But look, I have a picture of every reservoir, right? Look, that's Ragged Mountain. Let's see, pages are sticking together. Here is the 2012 Ragged Mountain. This was the plan to pipe water from the Rivanna, 1966, down to the 1885, expanded 1908, and then again in 2012, Ragged Mountain. Got a picture of the Sugar Hollow. I think it was 1924. But guess what? I also have a picture of a reservoir that was never built. The Buck Mountain Reservoir, the biggest eminent domain scandal in Albemarle County. And then finally, chapter 12 is on annexation and revenue sharing. It's the county pays the city not to invade the county and take away the county's revenue. Creates a whole bunch of problems. Here's a graphic that the city created of annexations. And the final annexation in 1963 was the biggest. Well, a third of the city comes from the 1963 annexation. And I also have a copy, a rare copy of the revenue sharing agreement from 1981. Anyone can read that and come up with a different conclusion than I have, right? I have my opinion, but I also include source material. And here's one of my biggest reference books, a 1976 book written by the Historical Society, which has now been taken over by City Council. This is sort of the narrative history of Charlottesville. It talks a lot about white people, and it talks a lot about black people. Not just blacks who were victims, blacks who got lynched, but about rich black people, successful black people. This is a pretty good source for to refute the white supremacy of Charlottesville. White supremacy is when you believe that a black person is weak or dumb and therefore always a victim of non-blacks, right? So black people can be white supremacists if they think blacks are victims of white people. Now, this book talks a lot about the successful blacks as well as some of the victimization. And now that is it, and I hope that you will click on some of the links, visit my blog, my website. The book is maybe 5% or less of what I've written. You know, the blog is much bigger than this book. The website has a lot of this stuff and more stuff, like the Court Square slave auction block right across from the county Civil War soldier, 1909, right next to Stonewall Jackson, 1919. Of course, Benjamin Tonsler. So Charlottesville does record its black history. It's a myth to say that the history needs to be rewritten to be more inclusive of blacks. It's already inclusive. Charlottesville is named after a black woman. But that doesn't fit the narrative that blacks are weak and victims and dependent on white people. So you don't hear much about it. So that's it, people. Thank you, and we will see you the next time.